A lot of church leaders get this totally backwards. You have so many things to communicate and so many channels to communicate on. You've got email, social media, websites, text messages, announcements, flyers you've got to make, all these different communications. But which of these should you be spending more time on, and which are we maybe spending too much time on already? Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner, joined by my co-host, as usual, Matthew Sewell. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks. Good to be with you, as always.
Yeah, so today I want to talk about something that comes up a little bit with a lot of church leaders, because all church leaders are crunched for time. They don't have enough time to do all the things they want to do. And one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is improving the quality of the communications that go out. So how much time should we spend on these different communications? We want to make them better, but the first response a lot of leaders have is, well, I don't have any time to make them better. I don't have any time. And so, of course, we need to find ways to make time, because if we want them to be, they're not worth sending if they're not going to be effective at what we want them to achieve. So how do we do it? And I think one way is we look at how we're spending our time already. And I see this all the time. I don't know if you've seen this before, but a lot of leaders, and we all do this as humans, like we can spend a lot of time on some things that sometimes aren't really that important, and then end up sort of rushing through some of the things that maybe are a lot more important. But I don't think we're very deliberate about it sometimes. So we'll see, like, maybe it's a little flyer or something on the website or a little fun thing on social media. I might spend hours making this graphic or this video or something that's like very few people are going to see, or maybe it's for not that big of an event. But then it's time for me to get up and speak in front of, say, the entire parish or the whole community, and everyone's going to be listening to me for a couple of minutes. And how long do I take to prepare for it? I get up there and just read something I wrote really quick, So I think there's a really big mismatch there on where we're putting our time preparing for those things. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, I mean, we always, I know, as long as I've known you, just about, our favorite adage, like around our team is, I didn't have time to write you a short email, so I wrote you a long one. And how I think, so whenever I think of this type of a thing, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But then, I mean, you get into things like opportunity cost, right? Like, that's not really a phrase I think I've mentioned on the show before, but it's not really a phrase that's in the common parlance for most churches, maybe mainline denominations, less so than, non-denominational churches, something like that, because those tend to be more agile, I suppose, and think in terms of, how businesses function. Not to say churches should necessarily function exactly like a business, but there's a reason that, that lots of businesses do well in certain senses, right? In terms of culture and loyalty, all that type of stuff, right? That's not gimmicky. And one of those things I think is opportunity cost. So, I mean, I really think of it that way. To one, say it's kind of a canard to say, something short is necessarily going to not take that long, and just throwing a flyer together, it takes a lot of effort. But then thinking, like you said, how many people, think of it in terms of proportion. So how many is this really actually going to reach? Being honest with myself as a church leader and saying, it's not how many I want it to reach, it's how many it will reach, and being realistic about that. So I guess maybe before you even get to that point, it just takes a lot of kind of self-reflection and goal setting in that sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you're saying, and of course, businesses are more incentivized to do this. I think that's where you're going. It's to be smart with how you allocate resources, and the way you do that is you look at what you call it ROI, your return on investment. I'm going to invest an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours into this thing. What's the return on that? What's the additional value? A lot of times the first 30 minutes might get you 90% of the value, and I'm going to spend another 5 hours working on something to make it just marginally better. Maybe that's not a smart way to use your time and resources. But in some cases, if you have something that has a high impact value, it's going to be in front of a lot of people. They're going to be paying very close attention to you. These are the moments you want to make it count, where you put in the extra effort to make it that much better, so that it really has a big effect. Because a little improvement there has a big effect in its results, because you have a big audience, you have a big opportunity, whatever the case may be. So I wanted to take just real quick, because we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, just to kind of get the concept across. But I got my trusty whiteboard today for
Yes,
this.
the whiteboard is back.
I'm making a habit of this, yeah. So, but if we think about it, just helps me to see, make sure my camera's focusing there. Sorry for those of you just listening audio. We'll explain this as we go so you can kind of understand it and not miss anything. But if we're thinking about like our reach, the different things we do to communicate with people, reach with, let's say, undivided attention. So when we have people's undivided attention and we're communicating, this is a really important time. We want to do a good job preparing for this. This is where we want to make our communications really quality, because it's going to have the biggest impact. So again, there's lots of ways to look at this. Not just, you don't just play a numbers game. It's just like which one's the biggest audience, but that can help. So this is one way to do it. But of course, you're going to be thinking about how important is the event or this communication. It might be with a small group, but it's a really important group, or it's a really important event. So you're going to put more time and energy into it. But just be deliberate about what you're doing. So if this is like all of our congregation, everybody we can reach, let's put some channels over here. So we already mentioned one, so on Sunday, when you're like speaking, so using your voice, your body language, you're there on Sunday in front of people speaking. So maybe you get a chance to make an announcement. Maybe you're the pastor, you're giving a homily or whatever. So you got on a Sunday, most churches have somewhere between 40 and 60% of their people there. So let's say 40 to 60% are in attendance. So on average in like the Catholic Church, it's around 39%, but you get to like Christmas or big events, you've got over 60% that are showing up. So it's somewhere in that range for most churches in there. But let's look at then, let's say text messaging. So texting. Now texting, actually, you can reach almost everybody. So there's a few at the end here, depending on if you have their number or whatever, but it's 90% plus that you can reach with a text message. Okay, so this is high impact, high disruption. Then let's see, email. So, and of course, if you have to have their phone numbers. If you don't have your phone numbers, let us know, because we can help you get everybody's phone numbers. That's what we do at Flocknote. And it's very straightforward and something you should have from every member of your community. Email, you're looking here at somewhere average open rates of like maybe 35 to 60%, So there's a range in here too. But this is kind of your reach on these big things with people, like where they're either texting, they're definitely reading it. Sunday speaking, if you're doing a good job, like they're listening to you, looking at you, reading you. Email, this is your open rate. So somewhere 35 to 60%. But then you get into a lot of the other things we spend our time on. So like our website, how many people are going to see this, engage in it, whatever it is. Maybe it's a lot but usually it's a pretty small marginal amount that actually are going to get a message that way, receive it, experience it in that way. Again, not to say websites not important. Don't misread this chart. Websites are very important to have a good website and a good web experience. But talking about allocating resources here, how much time should we put into this versus something else based on the return you get off of them? Think about social media, same thing. So social media, what's the open rate on Facebook now? 5%, something like that,
yeah.
Read rate.
For organic, yeah.
So it's marginal sort of stuff. Your app, this is, 5 to 15% or something are going to get your push notification on your app. It's going to be even fewer than that are going to actually go to the app and read it, than they will like your website or anything else. So, and then you have, things like flyers you're going to put time into making and creating. This one, obviously, this kind of depends on what's it for, how many people are you handing it to. Obviously, if you're handing it to somebody who's coming out the door and you're giving it to every single person, that might be more important to spend time on than something you're just giving to 10 kids to get some information out about, right? So that's going to vary a little bit there. But even with a flyer that you hand it to them doesn't mean they necessarily read it, doesn't mean they use it, all that kind of stuff. So your mileage varies there too. But there's actually a big difference. And so you notice that like these activities here, we would say have a high ROI, so a high return on investment.
That would be the top three for the audio only people who happen to just be listening.
Yes, I'm
to this.
sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, for the commentary there. So that's speaking in front of people. It's your text messages and your email. Okay. So then all the rest down here, stuff like your website, social media, your app, a flyer, again, varies depending on what the context is, are generally much lower return on investment in terms of time. Again, I'm not saying that some of these aren't important for different things at all. I'm saying when we allocate resources, how much time are we spending to make them really quality and do a good job? And I think if you look at this, the high ROI ones, a lot of times are the ones that we don't spend near enough time getting ready for. Again, if you got 2 minutes going out to talk in front of everybody, make it great. Practice it multiple times. How long does it take to practice a 2-minute speech? 5, 10 times. Practice it. Get it right. Make it dynamic. Use good body language. Have good energy. All those kinds of things. Present it well. You're going to send an email out, even if it's a regular email. A lot of your people are looking at it. Make it good. Make it entertaining. Make it high quality. Make it thoughtful. Take the time to write a short letter, not a long one, right? All those things. But when you think about how a lot of church leaders spend their time and money too, a lot of times it's down here with these low ROI things. They spend hours playing on social media. Sometimes they're hiring someone just to do some of these jobs. And that's fine. It doesn't mean it's not worthy of that. But if you're willing to hire somebody for that, how much more energy are you putting into your high ROI opportunities? So that's just kind of the idea. Is a lot of times I think these are backwards, where you're spending a lot of things. And I think, well, what do you think a few reasons might be, Matt? Like, why would people spend more time down here than up on some of these other ones?
Yeah, I mean, well, and maybe it's probably worth clarifying because I mean, like building a new website for a church whose current website is really, really ugly, I think is beside the point we're trying to make here, right? It would be like, because that's well worth all of the time that it takes. But I mean, if you use something like Shinomo or eCatholic, like we work with all the time, that I've personally worked with for some churches in my area, even that is really easy. But in terms of like it makes us feel good, right? There's a reason, but I think, yeah, by and large, so setting that aside for websites, it's like building out a really nice new page and spending 3 hours on it or something like that. That page might be important, but it might not be 3 hours important, right? But in terms of social media, I mean, there's a reason why Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those are so popular and are making so gosh darn much money. Is they're gamified. I mean, and it's well documented now, right? There's documentaries out now that are showing the science behind it. That it's like they exist to trick our brains into like saying, "Ooh, there's a little red button next to the notifications. I have notifications," and like just it's the same. And I mean, Matt, you and I are as guilty of it as anybody else, because we're human. But that's why I think it feels good to know that somebody liked my post. But then if you actually take a step back and look at, 1,000 people read my email, but it was just, in air quotes, just 25% opened it.
Right.
But then we're putting all of the stock into a Facebook post that got like 20 likes and 2 shares or something.
Exactly.
To say nothing of things that try to like woof their way through it and post the same thing everywhere, which I think we've talked about in a previous episode. But that would be my inclination, is that it feels good and gives us affirmation versus
Right. That's a good insight. So getting 20 bits of feedback, 20 likes, or opens or whatever on Facebook somehow feels more significant, like exciting, than getting 1,000 people that opened your email. I don't know why, but that's how they've designed it, right? They know how to get us into it, and we also just it's fun. So, but think about that. How much time did you spend reaching those 20 people versus reaching 1,000 people and making it really good and impactful, as a high ROI channel? I think a few other things. So we like doing fun things. It's just human. And it's easy for us to justify, I'm going to, make this graphic look really good. I'm going to play around with the design. I'm going to get all this stuff. And we can do that with email too. We can spend a lot of time playing with stuff that doesn't really matter about the email. Like, sure, get a nice background color, get a nice format, and you want it to look nice and professional, but that's not where you should spend most of your time. Where you should be spending your time is on the content of what you're putting into it. And I think one of the allures of social media, website, graphic sort of stuff for the app we've talked about it before, but it's a new thing. It's a new technology. It's a new way of reaching people. And we're hoping it's going to be some sort of shortcut. We think that if we finally get this right, it's going to blow up and it's going to really make the impact we've been looking for. But really, the opportunities, the high ROI opportunities are already right in front of us. It's just they're dressed up like hard work, And that's the trouble is, I think about this when I was a kid and we started a band, The first thing you did when you're a kid, when you start a band is what, Matt?
Find a name for the band.
Yeah, you name the band, right? Like you take hours and hours naming the band and coming up with a logo for the band and maybe making t-shirts and doing all the fun parts. But what does the band still need to be a band? Is like a good song, right? But that's where all the hard work starts. Like you got to work hard and write a whole lot of songs and get a good song in there before you can be a good band. But we do all the fun, easy sort of stuff first. And I think that happens when we're going to work on a lot of this. A lot of our communications. And again, you can do it with email and other things too. But I think if we really step back and say, which of these activities have the most potential to make the biggest impact, and I got limited resources, I have limited time to put on this, where should I put them? I think that kind of visual we just gave really helps. So we can be honest with ourselves of where we should put that extra effort to try to, gradually make our communications better and better quality. And allocate the right time in the right places.
Yeah. So the takeaway then, I guess, would be what? Just assessing all of the places that you're putting things out that people can see them and seeing how much time you're spending on them.
Yeah, I think assess how important the communication is, and then also which part of that communication is actually matters the most. So again, you can spend a lot of time on a graphic that maybe doesn't matter. Sometimes a graphic can make all the difference, and you should spend a ton of time on it. So you really have to look at which is the most important part of what I'm doing, and spend the time there and not get distracted with some of the other stuff and then say you didn't have time to make it better. But in general, anytime you're speaking in front of people and they're listening to you, you need to spend time on that. You need to practice it. You need to make it quality. You need to make sure you have good energy, good body language, all of those kind of things when you're presenting it, and be ready and have it written well and have it be meaningful and inspiring and engaging and something that people want to be a part of, right? So getting all the language right for that is the most important part. Like when we're working at Flocknote and trying to communicate something to customers or potential customers, we try to think of, what's important to them? What's going to stand out to them? What do they care about? Why are we just talking about stuff we care about or stuff that they care about? So all those things in good writing, good communicating, but that's where you spend the time. It's not in the fun design part. It's not in the fun new gimmicky tool. It's not digging into the analytics and all that stuff. That's a little bit of it. You get some good value spending a little time on those things. But a lot of the hard work is just in those other places. So in general, for most churches, more time and resources into your presentation, speaking, whether it could be even your sermons and homilies and stuff like that as well. Anytime you're in front of somebody, spending more time on that. And then emails, obviously texts reach a lot of people, but they're very short and very effective, but more disruptive. So you're not going to use those a ton, but you use those when you need to. The other stuff should probably, in most cases, be a lot less of your time. Again, not that they're not important, but that they should be relative to those things. We should not be spending near as much resources as we are on the others.
Nice. Well, yeah, I really like this topic. This is good. We could talk about this all day, but for now we'll cap it here. And before we go, of course, we always like to take a listener question. So we're going to head over to our People Guide to Church Problems segment. Okay, our question today is from our friend Bill. Bill asked, how often should we send periodic messages, once a week or less, is kind of what he had in mind, to our entire church, and how can I make sure we don't lose an Uno, as he said, and have people unsubscribe? And I'll also clarify there, he also mentioned the idea of creating a new list with all parishioners, kind of a new everyone list, if you will, and sending that instead of their master list each time they want to send something. So what's the best route to go there?
Yeah, so the concern here is you're going to send something out and people are going to unsubscribe. And then if they unsubscribe, we don't want them missing out on our other, announcements and future communications. So naturally, that's good. Now, you also want to respect the people on the other end, that if they unsubscribe, they've chosen to not receive your communications. So part of it is being clear about what your list is for. So if it's for a certain thing and they want those, great, they can stay on. If they don't want them anymore, we don't need to keep forcing them back on to that list. The question here, I think what he's getting at is when you're sending it to everybody in the whole church, it can be a little mixed. So it's like you're you're going to send something out and it's like, well, some people might not want this. A lot of people might be interested, but we don't want the few people who are not interested in this particular sort of special announcement to unsubscribe and then not get any of our regular emails anymore. So can be a tricky thing to navigate. So in general, when you're sending to everyone in a church, getting an email about once a week from everyone is very normal and acceptable. So if someone's not willing to get your weekly email, as long as it's decent, and they're a member of your community, and they unsubscribe, you probably need to respect that. They're probably not that interested in getting more communications from you and being a part of the church. And maybe that's a separate outreach plan another time where you go and you specifically reach out to folks who have unsubscribed or who used to be subscribed and are no longer, getting the messages, and you reach out to them with something different. So you can be specific about that and intentional. But generally, you can get away with a few special announcements here and then too. So you got your weekly newsletter coming out every week. Try to be at around the same time. And then if you're sneaking in a special announcement for a parish-wide or church-wide special event, that's not going to be an issue. So, people are going to, I think, normally accept that. You just want to make sure that the topic is really for everybody. So if it's really only for a small percentage of people, you don't want to be blasting that out to everybody, because then they will start to unsubscribe. They'll say, these are not the kind of announcements I signed up for. I'm going to unsubscribe, and then they're not going to get any of your weekly newsletters going forward. So if you're doing it every once in a while and it really does pertain to everybody, then that's a fine thing to do, I think. You're not going to really lose significant number of people unsubscribing from that you wouldn't have otherwise lost. If the announcement is not really for everybody, or you really think it is sort of its own thing aside from the everyone, normal newsletter, then you could create a separate list. So take everyone and put them on a separate list, and you can make that announcement. If they unsubscribe, you can make future announcements about the same event, and they're not going to keep getting the message and get more annoyed. So it's not, especially if you're making multiple announcements for like a new a series of announcements about an event or something going on, that's you want to send to everybody, but you don't want to annoy people with. Create a separate list. Send it to those people for that purpose. If they unsubscribe, make sure you respect that. Don't keep adding them back to the list. And so you can do it as kind of a special thing, but it really is a balance, because you don't want to keep doing that. If somebody really does unsubscribe, you don't want to keep putting them on another new special announcement and say, I didn't sign up for this. The other way to go about it would be to have people opt in for something. So if you have, say, a retreat coming up, what I would maybe do is send one message to the whole list that says, hey, we wanted to invite everyone to this. And you could be among other announcements potentially too, but click here, and we have smart buttons built into Flocknote that you can click and have it automatically add them to another list. So allow them to opt in to that list on their own. So you announce it to everybody. It could even be in a series of weekly newsletters where you remind people, hey, if you're interested in this, click here. And then they get on their own list, and that's where you make those announcements for people who have specifically opted in for whatever that event or retreat or whatever series of announcements may be. Yeah. Anything I missed there, Matt?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a case-by-case thing. And so hope that's a help, Bill, and any of you out there who may have had the same question. But that's all the time we have for today. But we have one more thing, of course, as always, before you go. So make sure to stick around as we kick it over to our friend Liz and find out where Uno is today.
Hey everyone, this week we're actually featuring a bit of a throwback photo, but this is Uno in the Pacific Northwest with our buddy Leo. And Leo is actually the son of Matt Sewell, our very own Matt. So we just love this photo and we wanted to share it with all of you on the Finding Uno show. Alrighty, so we want to hear more of your questions. We've gotten some great questions on our hotline, but I just wanted to remind you all where you can submit those. So if you go to findinguno.com and click on Ask a Question in the upper right-hand corner, you can submit your question there to our hotline and we may feature you in a future episode. That's all we got for you today. We'll see you next time on the Finding Uno show. Bye-bye.